Serial killers are not a new phenomenon. Long before Jack the Ripper began his legendary killing spree in London in the 1800s, there were infamous serial killers active throughout history. Why is Jack the Ripper the most famous serial killer in history when there have been more brutal and monstrous killers before him? Let's delve into the stories of some of the worst serial killers of antiquity, whose abysmal crimes make the famous, yet unidentified British serial killer look like a novice in comparison. Our journey begins in Greek mythology with Procrustes, also known as the Stretcher. This legendary killer from Attica kept a house by the side of a busy road where he offered hospitality to passing strangers, unbeknownst to his oblivious victims. If they were shorter than his special iron bed, he would stretch them by hammering or racking their bodies to fit. If they were longer, he would cut off their legs. In both cases, the victim died a terrible death. Fortunately, Procrustes met his end by his own method at the hands of the hero Theseus. Moving from myth to history, we encounter Liu Pengli, the first recorded serial killer in history, known as the Prince of Zhejiang. Liu Pengli was a 2nd century BC Han prince who believed he had a license to kill. For over 2 decades, he went on marauding expeditions with tens of slaves or young men, murdering over 100 people for sheer sport. His reign of terror ended when one of his victims' sons reported his bloody hobby to the emperor, who stripped him of his titles and banished him from the kingdom. Next, we travel to ancient Sri Lanka, where Queen Anula reigned from 47 to 42 BC. Known as one of the biggest misandrists in Asian history, Queen Anula poisoned her son and 4 husbands. In her quest to become queen regnant, her reign was filled with secret love affairs, a series of murders, and plenty of poison. Eventually, she was overthrown and burned alive, ending her gruesome reign. In ancient Rome, we find Locusta of Gaul, the first female serial killer in Western history, a masterful botanist and dedicated poisoner. Locusta took part in the assassinations of Claudius and Britannicus. She was one of Emperor Nero's favorite people, who used her as a trainer for other ambitious poisoners. Following Nero's death, Locusta was executed by his successor, Galba. In the 5th century AD, Zushi Natir, a wealthy resident of the Himyarite kingdom, modern-day Yemen, became infamous for his cruelty and disturbing crimes. He lured unsuspecting victims into his home with false promises of wealth and food, only to subject them to horrific abuse before ending their lives by throwing them from an upper-story window. His reign of terror came to an end when one of his intended victims turned on him, delivering a fatal blow that ended his reign of terror. Moving to medieval Ireland, we find Alice Keitlip, a noblewoman accused in the first recorded witch trial in British history. She was charged with poisoning her 4 husbands, practicing dark magic, and engaging in secret rituals. Before she could be arrested, Alice fled to England, her fate unknown. However, her servant was not as fortunate. She was convicted in her place and burned at the stake. Gilles de Rais, a knight and companion in arms of Joan of Arc, hid a terrifying secret that makes him one of history's most infamous figures. Between 1432 and 1440, he was accused of abducting and brutally ending the lives of over 140 children. His dark deeds eventually caught up with him, leading to his execution by hanging on October 26, 1440. In 16th century Europe, Peter Stump, infamously known as the Werewolf of Bedburg, was accused of committing horrific crimes, including the deaths of 14 children, one of whom was his own son. He claimed to possess a magical belt, supposedly given to him by the devil, which allowed him to transform into a wolf. His terrifying legend ended with his execution on October 31, 1589. In one of history's most gruesome punishments, Peter Neers, a notorious German outlaw and alleged dark magician of the 16th century, was feared across Europe for his brutal crimes. He was accused of taking the lives of 544 people, with claims that he practiced dark rituals using his victims. His reign of terror lasted for decades before he was captured and subjected to one of the most brutal executions of the time. On September 16th, 1581, finally, we reach Crispin Jenipertinga, a name feared across medieval Europe. Records claim he kept a diary detailing nearly 1,000 murders. His capture led to one of the most brutal punishments of the time. His body was broken on the wheel, a form of execution designed to prolong suffering. It took days before he finally succumbed. These figures from history remind us that the darkness of human nature is not confined to modern times. Some were driven by greed, others by sadistic pleasure, and some by twisted beliefs. But one thing remains certain: their stories continue to haunt history. Were they truly the most evil figures of their time, or were some victims of historical exaggeration? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.